Welcome back to ET Lifestyle, and today we'll be listing 15 horror films with outrageous gross margins at the box office worldwide. This list is based on production budgets compared to worldwide grosses. For those of you new to the channel, remember to subscribe and turn on notifications.
Exorcism is alive and well. The Bible is filled with demons.
The Last Exorcism, released in August 2010 with a production budget of $1.8 million. The Last Exorcism ended up raking in over $41 million in the United States and a combined total of $67 million worldwide with a gross margin of 97%.
Let's get out of here. If you can't save my daughter's soul, I will.
The Purge, an American dystopia horror film released in June 2013 with a production budget of $3 million. The Purge grossed over $64 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $89 million with a gross margin of 97%.
We're gonna make it through tonight and everything is gonna be okay.
Nothing is ever going to be okay again.
He doesn't want us to cut through our chains. No! He wants us to cut through our feet.
He helped me.
Saw 2, an American horror film released in October 2005 with a production budget of $4 million. Saw 2 grossed over $87 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $147 million with a gross margin of 97%.
Oh, yes. There will be blood.
See you tomorrow.
You know, one of these nights you could let me...
He's sexy. I like you. A lot.
Lights Out, an American supernatural horror film released in July 2016 with a production budget of $4.9 million. Lights Out grossed over $67 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $148 million with a gross margin of 97%.
And that's what she feeds on.
We're gonna be at Grandma's house for a little bit.
Insidious Chapter 2, an American supernatural horror film released in September 2013 with a production budget of $5 million. Insidious Chapter 2 grossed over $83 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $161 million with a gross margin of 97%.
What's he saying? He's got your baby. 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 He's got your baby.
John, wake up.
What?
Next door, I heard a scream.
Stay here. I'll go check it out.
John? Is everything all right?
Oh my God, you're covered in blood.
Go back inside.
Annabelle, an American supernatural horror film released in October 2014 with a production budget of $6.5 million. Annabelle grossed over $84 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $257 million with a gross margin of 97%.
Who are you?
Unfriended, released in April 2015 with a production budget of $1 million. Unfriended ended up raking in over $32 million in the United States and a combined total of $64 million worldwide with a gross margin of 98%.
I'm signing off.
No, he'll kill you.
I forgot, you hear me?
Why is he counting down? Hey, sweetie.
Morning, guys.
I would really like
Insidious, an American supernatural horror film released in April 2011 with a production budget of $1.5 million. Insidious grossed over $54 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $97 million with a gross margin of 98%.
It's not the house that's haunted. It's your son.
This is your room, Hunter.
Paranormal Activity 2, an American supernatural horror film released in October 2010 with a production budget of $3 million. Paranormal Activity 2 grossed over $84 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $177 million with a gross margin of 98%.
Hey, Christy, you want to say hi? Come on, give us a wave here, Christy.
Paranormal Activity 3, an American supernatural horror film released in October 2011 with a production budget of $5 million. Paranormal Activity 3 grossed over $104 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $207 million with a gross margin of 98%.
Stop! I'm sorry. It's not funny. You got your toothbrush?
Check.
Do you have your deodorant?
Check.
Do you have your cozy clothes?
Got that.
What?
Do they know I'm black?
Get Out, an American horror film released in February 2017 with a production budget of $4.5 million. Get Out grossed over $176 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $255 million with a gross margin of 98%.
South Hartford 911, what is your emergency?
Three people.
Ma'am, what's the problem?
3 people.
The Devil Inside, an American supernatural horror film released in October 2010 with a production budget of $1 million. The Devil Inside grossed over $53 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $101 million with a gross margin of 99%.
Let my mother go.
You'll burn.
Someone there? I can hear you.
Saw, an American horror film released in October 2004 with a production budget of $1.2 million. Saw grossed over $56 million in the United States and worldwide totals exceeded $103 million with a gross margin of 99%.
Explore the Blair Witch.
I can see you.
I'm really excited about it.
The Blair Witch Project, an American supernatural horror film released in July 1999 with a production budget of $60,000. The Blair Witch Project grossed over $140 million in the United States, and worldwide totals exceeded $248 million with a gross margin of 99.97%.
Tell me where you are, John!
High def camera on. My girlfriend Katie, she thinks there's something in the house. I don't know.
You believe me, right?
Paranormal Activity, an American supernatural horror film released in September 2009 with a production budget of $15,000. Paranormal Activity grossed over $107 million in the United States, and worldwide totals exceeded $193 million with a gross margin of 99.99%.
This thing left a message.
If it's not a ghost, what is it?
If you think we missed out on any horror film that should have made the list, tell us in the comments section below. And remember to subscribe and follow us on Twitter and Instagram at etlifestyle_web. As always, have a great day.